What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit similar to what we've been doing. We're going to be making a window washer job system, and if you guys like this type of content, please make sure to subscribe and leave a like. That's the best way that you can support this channel. And if you guys want any of these assets that I've been making, you can join my Discord server in the description of the video, and I will be releasing all of these models there, and I'll also be releasing the updated versions if we go and, you know, if I end up making a new video on how to optimize it or add something new, I'll be putting the updated files there as well. So without further ado, guys, let me show you how this works. It's a pretty simple window washer system. It's only 2 scripts, and the way it works is it's set to every 10 seconds right now, but you really want this set to like every 2 to 3 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes. And every so often, all of these windows are going to get dirty, just like you saw. And if you have this window spray tool, you can walk up to it and you can hold down on the window and clean it. Now, if the script does its thing while we're trying to do it, it'll cause a little lag. That's why you want it set to a little longer, because we're not offering it a lot of time to clean itself. So every window takes a different amount of time to clean, and every window also has a different price that they'll pay. And so this is really cool. So you can add this to, you know, anywhere where there's going to be a lot of players in your game, and you can have a team that will have this tool and they can go around and clean windows. So it's not, you know, something that you probably like base your entire game off of, but it's definitely something that you can add that will just add a little bit more fun for the player, add a little bit more role play for the player if that's the type of game that you're going after. So I hope you guys enjoy this video, and if you do, again, make sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification button. And without further ado, let's get to a clean base plate and get to work. Alright guys, so now that we're in Studio and we have our clean base plate, what we're going to want to do is just start off by designing our window part. And so this is pretty easy. What we're going to want to do is just put a part in the workspace and just size it to whatever. And if you already have windows, it's important to make sure that we create a folder in the workspace and we rename it to Windows, and we put your window parts inside of that window. And it's very important that you do that, because that's how we're going to find all of these parts. So you can name it whatever after that, it doesn't matter what you name it. I'm just going to name mine Windows. They can all be different names, whatever. The most important part though is that they have inside of them the decals for the dirty window display, and then we also want to put a proximity prompt. Now I'm going to show you how I found the dirty window decal that I'm using. I just literally looked up like dirty window, and I had these 2 options at the top, so I went with the one on the left. And so that's what I'm going to do, is just kind of throw it inside of our part, and then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to set the property to back, so it's on both sides. And then I want to rename these to 1 and 2. And so once we have that, I'm going to just go ahead and set the transparency to 1 so that we can't see them at all. And then I am going to check to see if actually, I think that's everything right there that we need to do. So once we have that set up, we have our windows like ready to go, and you can duplicate this as many times as you want. What I'm gonna do is, sorry about that, I had my dog was barking. So what we're gonna do now is actually, you can duplicate, like I was saying, you can duplicate these as many times as you want. And it doesn't really matter what the names are. We can name them whatever we want. The most important part is that we have these 3 things inside of it so that we can make the windows look dirty. So now that we have that all set up, we're gonna go ahead and put a script in the server script service, and I'm just gonna rename this to window handler. And so what we want to do in here is a couple of things. Okay, we want to first and foremost, we want to write a function that's going to make the windows dirty after a certain amount of time. And then we also want a function to not a function, but we want to be able to get the proximity prompts of all of these windows, and then we want to write a prox triggered function so that we can get the proximity prompt in all of those and figure out which proximity prompt is being triggered. And then when it's triggered, we want to, figure out some information about the player, and if the information turns out to be the correct information, then we want to do something. So that's the simplest way that I can put it. So the first thing that we want to do is get our windows. So we're going to say local windows is equal to game.workspace.windows get children. And so what that's going to do is get all of the parts inside of this window folder. So now the next thing that I'm going to do is set up a local function that is going to make the windows dirty after a certain amount of time. So what we're going to want to do, I'm just going to call this local function loop, and inside of loop we're going to say while true do, and then we're going to put our wait, and I'm going to say we're going to wait about we'll wait about 50 seconds just for the video, and actually we'll put it 30. So if you're going to put this in your game, make sure you change this value to like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something that's long. You want a long wait time for this. So especially if you're going to have a lot of windows, you want to make sure you have a long wait time. And so now that we have that, what we're going to want to do is loop through our windows. So we're going to say for I comma window in pairs, and then in the parentheses, this is where we're going to put our windows parameter that we wrote. And once we do that, we can put do and press enter, and now we want to check to see if the window is apart. So we're going to say if window is apart, then, and if it is apart, then what we want to do is get the proximity prompt inside of the part, and then we also want to get the two decals that are there, and we also want to set a random hold time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say local prox is equal to window.proximity prompt, and then we're going to say local 1, or we'll say local front is equal to prox, or we'll say window square parentheses 1. We'll say local back is equal to window square parentheses 2, and then we're gonna say local what are we gonna call this? Local hold is equal to, let's see, math.random, and then inside of the parentheses here we want to put our numbers, so we're going to say 1, 4. And so what this is going to do is get a random number between 1 and 4, and that'll be our random hold time. And so now that we have that, what we're going to want to do is we want to set the action text of the proximity prompt to the hold time, and we also want to put some text in there as well. So what I'm going to say, or what I'm going to do, is prox dot action text is equal to, and then we're going to put clean window, and then we'll say time, and then we'll put a colon and a space, and then we'll put 2 dots on the outside of these quotations, and we'll say hold. Actually, we'll say toString, and then we'll say hold. Now it's very important that you put this toString, because if you don't, it could possibly throw an error, because it's trying to print, like, this is text and this is a number, and technically if I put a number in here, this number is considered a string instead of a number value. And when we make a random value, I believe it's considered a number value instead of a string. And so if we tried to print it as a string, it would throw an error, because it would say like, oh, you're trying to print an instance instead of a string. And so we wanted to just make it toString. And so what that does is it'll print whatever number that it chose as a string instead of as a number, which wouldn't work anyways. And so once we have that, we can just put a period at the end, or we can, say like seconds, and then put some dots. Boom. And so once we have that, we can move on to setting our trigger. Actually, the first thing we want to do before we set our triggered function is set the hold duration to hold. And if you have problems spelling out these properties, make sure you have your property tab open. You can click on the proximity prompt and find in the properties here where it says hold duration. And so this is the property that we're trying to manipulate with the script. So we're doing proximity prompt, and then it's coming in here and finding hold duration, and then it's going to set that to our random number. And so now that we have that, we can say prox.triggered connect, and then we'll say function, and in these parentheses, since this is a server script, we want to put player. And so now that we have our function set up and ready to go, what we want to do is check to see if actually no, we don't want to put a prox trigger here. What we want to do here is we want to check to see if the front visibility and the back visibility is equal to 1. VISIBILE visible. There we go. And back dot visible. I think that's right. Let's see. Oh, transparency. That's what we need to do. So instead of visible, we need to do transparency. I'm thinking of GUIs instead of decals. So we have transparency is equal to 1. Then, so if these decals are transparent, then we want to set the transparency to 0.8. So we'll say front dot transparency is equal to 0.8, and then we'll say back dot transparency is equal to 0.8. So now that we have our transparency set to 0.8, the next thing that we're going to want to do is put an else statement that says if these are set to 0.8 already, then we just want to return. So we don't really need to put an else statement there. I'm not sure if this return is going to break it. If it is, then we're going to put a print statement instead, because the thing is I don't want to overload the output with a bunch of print statements all the time. And so just having it return rather than print is probably a better option, because if you have a bunch of things, especially if we have like 100 windows and it's printing that 100 times every 2 minutes, then it's going to be a problem. And I didn't set this up to run yet, actually, so it's not going to do anything. How we would make this run is actually pretty simple. We would use something called a quarantine wrap. I think that's how you pronounce it. So kind of very similar to what we did with our trash system. We're going to say quarantine, I'm sorry, CORO, quarantine dot wrap. And then in here we'll say loop. And then on the outside of this, we need to put an extra set of parentheses so it will run properly. And I'm going to set this to every 10 seconds just for the purpose of the video, so that we don't have to spend a whole 30 seconds just waiting for something to happen. We'll have 10 seconds. So currently it's not doing anything. There we go. So you can see how the decals came up, and now the proximity prompts are there. So that is it for that loop. And so the next thing that we can move on to is actually coding our proximity prompts. And we want the proximity prompts to trigger even though that we have a while true do loop running. And so the way that we do that is very similar to how we've done it for the last 3 videos. So we're going to say for I, comma, windows, or window in pairs, and then here we're going to say windows with an S. And then we're going to say if window is a part, then, and then after that we're going to say local prox is equal to window dot proximity prompt, and then we'll say prox dot triggered connect function, and then here we'll say player. And so boom, so once we have that there is going to first allow us to get our proximity prompt from the window part, and it's going to wait and listen for whichever proximity prompt is triggered. So now we have that, but we want to set up some other local parameters. We do want to set up our front and back parameters, and I'm just going to copy and paste those from our loop function, and I'm going to put them in this loop down here. And then the next thing that I want to do is I want to make the proximity prompt enabled is equal to false. So we're going to say prox dot enabled is equal to false. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because I'm going to make a tool that will enable the proximity prompt whenever the player equips the spray tool. So the next thing that we want to do is code our proximity prompt. So whenever the player triggers this proximity prompt, there's a few things that we're going to want to do. Now we're going to want to check to see if the transparency is equal to 1, and then if it is already, and that means it's already clean. So we'll say if, and I'm going to probably just copy this if statement here because we already wrote it once, so I don't want to write it again. And so if we have that, then we're going to say print window is clean. And we can have these print statements here because it's not going to print like every 10 seconds. It's only going to print whenever a player tries to clean already clean window. And so it probably would be fired pretty rarely, to be honest with you. And so then we're going to paste it again. And instead of saying it's equal to 1, we're going to say it's not equal to 1. So we got to put this little squiggly line in front of the equal sign. And we want to say else if. So that's boom. And we can get rid of this end down here. So we have an extra end still. Yeah, we did. So now that we have that, we want to do a few things here that will allow the proximity prompt to be not only like fired, but when it's fired, we want a few things to happen. We want the script to generate a random price, so that every time a player cleans a window, it's a different price, and we can make the change as drastic as we want. But the easiest way to do this is just say local price is equal to math.random, and then inside of here we can say like 300, or we can say 50 to 300. So we'll say 100 to 500. And so any window they clean can be anywhere in between those prices, and you can change that to whatever you want. And so once we have that, we want to get the player's local money stats. And if you haven't watched the video already on how to create a bank system, that is what we're using. And in our player values, we create a folder inside of the player called player stats, and then we create a value inside of the player stats called cash. And so how we find that is we can say player.playerstats.cash, and that is our money stats value. And so whenever this proximity prompt is triggered, if the windows are dirty, then we want to generate a price, we want to get the player's value, and then we want to pay the player. So we actually want to set the transparency back to 1 first, and then we want to pay the player. So we're going to say front.transparency and is equal to 1, and then we'll say back.transparency is equal to 1, and then we'll say money stats.value is equal to money stats.value plus price. And then once we have that, we're going to want to fire a remote event, and I'm going to call this remote event, we're just going to call it window pay. And the reason I want to fire this is because when we go to create our tool, I'm going to make it so that the tool will create a GUI that will display to the player how much they're being paid in big green text. And so it just feels more interactive to the player whenever they get done cleaning a window. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go into our starter pack, and I'm just going to do this in starter pack for now because it's a little easier, and I'm just going to call this like spray. And inside of here I just need a tool handle. If you have like a spray bottle model or like a window spray thing, or you can name it whatever you want, honestly, or if you have your own tool model already, you can just throw that in there. I'm just gonna get a quick handle real quick from a random tool and put it in my tool. And so in here, all we really need to do is put our local script, and once we have that, we can just begin coding right away. And so this script isn't going to be too crazy. We are going to create a GUI with this script, but that's probably the hardest thing that we're going to do today. So we're going to say local player is equal to game.players.localPlayer, and then we're going to say local tool is equal to script.parent. And then we're going to want to create a local function, and I'm going to call this like create GUI. And then inside this local function, we're going to start off by creating a GUI. So we're going to say local GUI is equal to instance.new, and then we're going to put some parentheses, quotations. We're going to say screen GUI, and then under that we're going to say GUI.name is equal to pay GUI. And then we're going to say GUI.resetOnSpawn is equal to false. So once we have that, we can create our frame. So we're going to say local frame is equal to instance.new, and in here we're going to say frame, and under this we're going to say frame.position is equal to udim2.new, and I already have my values, so you can just copy what I put, but pretty much we just want to size it nicely, and then under that we also want to set our frame. Is that the size or is that the position? Let me check. So this first one we want to set, this is going to be size, not position. So these numbers 0, 300, 0, and 70 are for frame size, and then under that we'll do frame position. Is equal to udim2.new, and then we'll put some parentheses, and in this position we will put our values, and you can just copy my values. So we're going to put 0.5, -150, 0.5, and -35 in there. And so once we do that, we can we can stylize our frame. And so we're going to do background transparency, or we'll do background color first, is equal to color3.new, and then in here we'll put 0, 0, 0, and then we'll say frame dot background transparency is equal to 0.5, and then once we do that, that's pretty much all the styling we need to do for the frame. So we're gonna set the frame's parent to GUI. And so once we have that, we can set up our text label. Go to instance.new text label, and then we want to set this up. So there's a little more to do here. We want to do the size of the text label, and then we want to set the background transparency to 1. So the text label size is going to be equal to udim2.new, and then inside the parentheses here we just want to put 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. And so once we have that, we can just set our background transparency to 1 because we don't want to see it at all, and then we can go ahead and start playing with our text. So for the text here, in this create GUI up here at the top in the parentheses, we want to put the parameter price, because this is what we're going to be using to display this price number that we're firing to the client. So we're having the price value be transmitted to the client through our remote event that we created called window event, and so this is where we're going to receive it. So here, right here, and then we never fired it, but we're going to receive it in the local script. So in the parameter up here where it says create GUI, we want to put price, and then down here we want to say game.replicatedStorage.window pay, and then we want to say fire client, and we want to transmit to the client the player's name. You always have to have the player parameter in the server, and then we want to send the price value, and so this is going to transmit these bits of information to the client, and we're going to receive it here in the create GUI function, so that when we do our text right now, we can display how much the player has made. So we can say something like window has been cleaned, you've been paid. So window has been cleaned, you have been paid, and then here we can put our price dot dot, and then we can say look out for more dirty windows, And so once we have that, we can set our text we can set our text size, we can set our to 18, and we can set our text color is equal to color3.new, and then we're gonna make it green. And the way we make it green, and there's a simple way to do it, like if you start putting in some numbers here, there'll be like a little color box and you can just click that. But if you're cool like me and you know the numbers, then you know green is just 255 in the middle. Because literally, like if we did, instead of .new, we did from RGB. RGB stands for red, green, blue. So if you wanted all red, we would just do 255 0 0. If we want green, we want 0 255 0. If we want blue, we can do 0 0 255, and I'll show you. So 0 0 255, and that gives me blue. And so you don't have to know that for everyone. I mean, like I'm not gonna know that. I just know that for red, green, and blue. Those are the basics, and it's good to know that. It can save you a little bit of time, but I wasted all of that time explaining it, so thank you. But now that we have that, we can go ahead and set our text font to luckiest guy, because that's my favorite. So we'll say .font is equal to emu.font.luckiest guy. And if you have a font that you like, you can put it there. It doesn't really matter. And then the last thing I want to do is set the parent to the frame. Once we do that, we want to set the GUI parent to the player, to the player's player GUI. And then we want to wait 5, and then we want to destroy the GUI. GUI destroy. And so what that's going to do is it's going to create this GUI, it's going to print how much the player got paid, and then it's going to wait 5 seconds so the player can read it, and then it's going to destroy itself. And so that is pretty much the hardest part of this function. The next thing that we want to do is we want to, when the player equips this tool, we want to have all of the proximity prompts set to enabled. When he unequips the tool, we want to disable the proximity prompts, and then when the client event is fired, we want to create the pay GUI. So how we can do that is pretty simple. So we're going to say tool.equipped connect function, and then we're going to say for I comma window in pairs windows, like we've been doing this whole time. Or actually, we're going to have to say local windows is equal to game.workspace.windows get children. And we're going to want to do this individually in each of our functions here, because if we don't, it's going to mess it up. So once we have that, we can say do, press enter, and we'll get our function. So we're going to want to say if window is a part, then, and then once we have that, we're going to want to get the proximity prompt inside of that window. And the way we do that, and actually we can just do it this way. Instead of like getting the proximity prompt by itself, we can just literally like say window.proximityPrompt.enabled, and we want to set this to true and not false. So once we have that, we can write another function, and we can say tool.unequipped connect function, all that good stuff, and then we can literally just copy and paste what we just wrote, because we don't have to write it again. Unless you really want to learn it and drill it in your head, you can write it again. But I already know this stuff pretty well, because this is like the third time I'm writing this. So now that we have that, the only thing that we want to do is set up our create GUI function to fire when this client event is fired. So we're going to say game.replicatedStorage.windowPay on client event connect, and then in the parentheses here we're just going to want to put our create GUI function and without the parentheses, and that should set it all up to work. The next thing to do is to test and see if anything is broken. So let's open it up. Alright, so we're in the game. If we walk up to this, I didn't set these to be enabled to false. Either that, I should have, like, either that or it's just not working. So yeah, it should, something isn't working. Okay, so I misspelled proximity prompt here, so it needs to be an O and not an I. And so I think once we do that, it should fix it. So there's always going to be little errors like that. If you misspell one thing, it's going to throw an error. So just make sure your spelling's all correct. And now see how it's disabled, but I knocked the window over. Crap. So now when I open up our tool, it'll enable it and it'll show us how long it's going to take for us to get it. So unable to assign text color to brick, expected, got color 3. Oh, okay, so instead of text color we had to say text color 3, so that's why it's throwing this error. Unable to assign property text color, brick color, expected, got text color 3. So we had to do text color 3 instead of text color, because we're using color 3 right here as well. So it's very important that you do that, because again, it will throw an error. So let's test it one more time and see what we got. Alright, so boom. So it's going to take 4 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. So let's do this 1 second, and boom, we get paid. So we can edit this a little bit to make it like not so crazy looking. We can go back in here and say in the local script, and then I want to put a $ here, and then where it says this look, I want to put a period and a space, so it looks more so it just looks better. Let's test it one more time. Let's see how it looks. Alright, so one. Alright, let's test this one. Boom. Been paid $2.14 and it gives us our money. So boom. So that's pretty much it, guys. You can see the difference between the two windows as well. So the last thing that I can say to do is just to make sure that you change this wait time to like 300 or something, like big, so that like the windows stay clean for a while. But other than that, we're pretty much done with this video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button. If you guys want to find this file so that you can use it for your game, you can join my Discord server. It'll be in the link in the description and you can get it there. But that's all I got for you today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and have a good day.